In the endless reach of the desert, beneath skies scorched and sand swept, there rests a shard of time misplaced. Not ancient in the way fossils are ancient. Not even primordial in the way planets are born of dust. The Hypatia stone, a fragment so alien it defies origin, lies quiet in Egypt's great sand sea. Found by chance. Held now like a question the universe dared us to ask. This is no ordinary meteorite. Its molecular structure tells no familiar story. Not of Earth, nor even the solar family that raised us. Not Mars, not the Moon, not the asteroid belt or any familiar lunar kin. It whispers of chemistry out of place. Of atoms arranged in a symmetry unpracticed by nature as we know it. Polyaromatic hydrocarbons laced with exotic metals. Grains older than the sun. As if some distant hand sculpted matter in a language forgotten before language began. In the stone's matrix, scientists found a lack of silicate minerals, foundational to most planetary bodies, and instead found carbon compounds compressed with energy but lacking the usual fingerprints of earthly formation. Nickel, phosphorus, iron, but in wild proportions. Some particles inside it contain aluminum and silicon in ratios unseen in terrestrial or solar chemistry. The Hypatia stone behaves like it was never meant for our world. Like it arrived not by mistake, but by design. There are those who say it predates Earth, predates the Sun, that it formed in the deep outer layers of a supernova, or the cooling remnants of an ancient star, one that collapsed before soul was ever kindled. In this view, the Hypatia stone is not from another place, but another era entirely. A fossil not of biology, but of the cosmos itself. A relic from before the neighborhood existed. What might it mean to hold something older than your sky? Imagine a world shattered, its memory scattered across interstellar drift. In that vision, the Hypatia stone is a messenger, not from life, but from the conditions life once required. Maybe it is the remnant of a planet with no name. A sphere swallowed in flame, lost to time, and all that remains is this, a splinter flung across gulfs, arriving silently on a dune where no water flows. Some speculate further, that the stone was not formed, but engineered. Its irregularities, the strange inclusions, the absence of typical isotopic decay, point to processes unknown. That it was forged in the core of an ancient alien structure, or harvested from the deep crust of a rogue planet seated with intelligent hand. Perhaps this is not a meteorite, but a container. A vessel for knowledge whose key we've yet to recognize. The idea is not science fiction. It is the logical extension of our ignorance. When we study something that does not fit, the mind fills in with story. But what if the story is memory, not ours, but the universe's? In the stone, there are tiny diamonds, formed under immense pressure. These are not industrial or decorative. They are ancient, microscopic, and scattered like stars in a black matrix. Each diamond may carry within it a record, not of image or word, but of temperature, composition, and violence. A diary written in compression. A story of impact, passage, and arrival. The stone was found in 1996. It took years before we understood how different it truly was. And even now, no origin has been agreed upon. It is categorized, uncomfortably, as an extraterrestrial pebble. Yet we know it is not merely from space. Many things are from space. This is something else. You could hold it in your hand and not feel its age. You could touch its cool, dark surface and feel no heat, no tremor, no whisper. But deep inside, beyond the reach of sight, there is time. Compact, preserved, unfamiliar. Like the hushed sound of a song you've never heard before, but somehow recognize. What if it is not a messenger, but a seed? A crystal lattice carrying within it the blueprint for unknown forms of matter? An archive of chemistry alien to our periodic table? Perhaps life, as we know it, would never grow from such origins, but life as we do not yet know might. Or perhaps it is memory. Raw. Unfiltered cosmic memory. Not sentience, but chronology. A record of what it felt like to be matter in the early universe. Before galaxies. Before heat found structure. Before entropy found beauty. We have analyzed it with spectroscopy, with electron microscopy, with X-rays. And every layer only deepens the mystery. Some parts of the stone are chemically inert in a way that no known material should be, as if purposefully protected. As if they resist examination. Or worse, they have already been read. Used. Emptied. Is that possible? That the Hypatia stone was never meant to be found? That its journey was complete long before it reached us? It landed softly. No crater. No fireball. Just embedded in the sand like a coin left in a long-abandoned well. It waited. And perhaps we were never meant to notice. But we did. Some compare it to the Black Stone of Mecca. Others to the Kaaba meteorite of pre-Islamic lore. Sacred stones. Guiding stones. Objects around which stories, and sometimes civilizations, orbit. But the Hypatia stone has no shrine. No worshippers. Only scientists, and the occasional dreamer. It remains quiet. Even now, under glass and light, it remains dark. No glow. No hum. But sometimes, in the right silence, you can imagine it remembers. That it contains a story not yet spoken aloud. Not because it can't be told, but because we do not yet know how to ask. One day, a child may hold a new tool. One designed not by metal or electricity, but by resonance, vibration, and patience. And when that tool brushes against the surface of this old, alien fragment, the story will begin to play. And what it tells us will not be about Earth. It will be about before. About stars that burned blue-white and died in silence. About dust that never knew gravity. About structures so vast they folded space like parchment. About intelligence unshaped by hunger or need. And perhaps it will speak of us. Not as children. Not as apes who climb to curiosity. But as listeners. As the final audience for a song that began before sound existed. For now, the stone waits. And so do we. In the deep stillness of the Pacific night, far from shore and satellite gaze, a streak of light cut across the sky on January 8, 2014. It was brief, bright, and then gone. No grand fireball. No headline. Just another data point in the vast silence between stars. But what burned that night was no ordinary visitor. Registered by U.S. Department of Defense sensors, the object entered Earth's atmosphere at an astonishing speed, over 210,000 kilometers per hour. Its velocity was so extreme, its trajectory so steep, that when the data was quietly examined by astrophysicists years later, something remarkable came to light. The object had not come from within the solar system. It was interstellar. The first known meteor of its kind to impact Earth. Its name, now etched in scientific lore, is CNEOS January 8, 2014. And unlike Oumuamua or Borisov, the interstellar voyagers who merely passed through, this one did not leave. It arrived. It collided. It touched the ocean and perhaps still waits beneath its waves. For a time, it was just numbers, position, angle, speed. But data has gravity, and curiosity followed. Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb and his team proposed that this meteor might be more than stone and heat. Its resilience, as calculated, suggested material strength far exceeding iron. It did not fracture at the altitude expected. It penetrated deeply before breaking apart. To withstand such forces, it must have been forged from something dense, something engineered, perhaps. Could it have been a fragment of alien technology? This is not a claim. It is a question. A possibility drawn from what we know, and more poignantly, from what we don't. In a universe 13.8 billion years old, scattered with worlds in every direction, the idea of relics, cast-off debris from civilizations long vanished, is not fantasy. It is statistical inevitability. And if such relics travel between stars, some may fall, some may land, and some may survive. Loeb launched an expedition. In the summer of 2023, a ship set sail to retrieve fragments of the meteor from the seafloor north of Papua New Guinea. Using a magnetic sled and a trail of iron spherules scattered like breadcrumbs in the ocean mud, they searched not for a craft, but for whispers of its shell, remnants of whatever burned in the atmosphere and melted into dust. They found them. Tiny metallic spheres, smooth and strange. Less than a millimeter in size. Composed of rare elements, beryllium, lanthanum, uranium, in ratios uncommon to Earth. Not proof, but anomaly. Not message, but signature. The trace left by a visitor with no voice, no flag, no echo. What if these are seeds? Discarded hulls of self-replicating probes sent millennia ago from stars we do not yet see? What if this was not an accident, but a delivery? The idea of panspermia, that life's building blocks travel on celestial currents, is old. But this is something different. Not chemistry, but artifice. The possibility that intelligence, once born, sends forth emissaries. Unmanned, unburdened by flesh. Designed only to drift, to endure, to learn. Some crash. Some fail. Some, perhaps, succeed. This meteor, so small in its dying, left behind a question far larger than itself. If it is alien, it is ancient. If it is natural, it is extraordinary. In either case, it challenges the comfort of boundaries. No longer can we say that space begins out there, beyond our atmosphere. It has arrived. It has entered our sky. There's something deeply humbling in that. That Earth, our quiet blue cradle, is not sealed off from the rest of the galaxy. That the same winds that once scattered spores across a young world may now scatter technologies across light years. That not every signal needs a radio. Not every message needs a language. Perhaps intelligence leaves its mark not through communication, but through the impossible material itself. A single drop of titanium alloy from a star 10 million years gone. A melted fragment from the shell of a craft whose builders have long since turned to dust. A meteor, no larger than a grapefruit, containing within its wreckage the most meaningful silence we've ever encountered. And if it is nothing more than an interstellar rock, still the story holds. Because that rock has crossed the void. That rock has moved from another sun's embrace to ours. That rock has burned in our air, touched our sea, and now rests in the hands of humans, strange creatures who look at the sky not with fear, but with longing. It could be the first of many, or the last of few. But either way, it is real. It did not pass us by like a ghost ship. It came to meet us, to touch this planet, to leave something behind. And in that contact, brief, explosive, beautiful, it became part of Earth's story. Not as a conqueror or savior or threat, but as a visitor, a reminder that we are not alone in motion, that we, too, are adrift in a sea of travelers, that out there, beyond the sun, lie other fires, other stories, other objects waiting to fall. Beneath the red earth of South Africa, in the quiet cradle of stone carved 3 billion years ago, Strange objects rest like forgotten punctuation marks in the sentence of deep time. They are small, spherical, some ridged, others smooth, some hollow, some solid, perfectly balanced, and entirely unexplained. They are called the Klarkstorp spheres, found within pyrophyllite deposits near Otterstil in the northwest province. The rock that holds them is Precambrian in age, over 2.8 billion years old. That is not a metaphor. That is geological record. These stones, or whatever they are, have been cradled inside the earth since before multicellular life, before oxygen, before color painted the seas. The spheres themselves range in size, most no larger than a coin, and are often made of a mixture of hematite or wollastonite. Their shapes are curiously refined. Some are perfectly round, others have 3 parallel grooves etched around their circumference like the tracks of a celestial lathe. To hold one is to hold a contradiction, something that feels man-made, and yet predates humanity itself. Officially, they are called concretions, a natural result of mineral growth in sedimentary stone. That is the simplest explanation. Spheres formed by slow, consistent pressure, shaped by time and chemistry. But this explanation begins to fray under scrutiny. Why the perfect symmetry? Why the precision of the grooves? Why are some made of materials different than their surrounding matrix, even resistant to pressures that should have shattered them? And most oddly, why do so many appear aligned when discovered in clusters, as if arranged? Of course, these are just questions. But history has taught us that questions, left unanswered, become legends. The Klarkstorp spheres have been called out-of-place artifacts, or opiarts, by fringe researchers and dreamers alike. Relics from a time before time. Tools of an ancient civilization wiped from history. Or even remnants of extraterrestrial devices, left behind during a forgotten visitation. Some say they are memory cores. Others imagine them as navigational markers, encoded with mathematical sequences in form rather than inscription. Some believe they were never meant for us to find. That they were planted, or scattered, or buried not by erosion, but by intention. Geologists push back, as they must. To them, these are geological curiosities. Nothing more. And yet, even within academic circles, there is a quiet awe. An acknowledgement that their formation is, if natural, extraordinarily rare. Because these spheres are not unique in composition, but they are unique in pattern, in proportion, in how their design seems to whisper of hands, of thought. In museums and vaults, the spheres sit under glass. No labels suggesting alien origin. No mention of time's defiance. Just quiet presence. Visitors peer at them, puzzled. Children tap the glass. Scholars shrug. And still the questions remain. How could nature, in its chaos and indifference, sculpt such order? How could these grooves, even equidistant, deep, form through random layering? How could multiple spheres exhibit such similarity across vast eons and pressures? Some skeptics suggest pareidolia, that human minds are wired to see pattern, to see design where none exists. That the grooves are merely erosion lines. That the smoothness is a trick of mineral growth. That the perfection is illusion. But deep down, we know how to listen to wonder. We know when something asks us to look again. Imagine, for a moment, that the Klarkstorp spheres are not accidental. Imagine they were forged. Not in fire, but in knowledge. Imagine they are fragments of an archive. Not of words, but of form, geometry as language. If a distant intelligence wished to leave behind evidence not bound by biology, not erased by weather, not corrupted by paper or silicon, what would it use? Shape, not code. Not sound, not image, but shape. 3 grooves. Equidistant. Encircling. Repeating. What if that is the message? What if it's not a message at all, but a reminder? That time is longer than we dare believe. That we are not the first to wonder. In the absence of direct evidence, we are left with something more powerful: mystery. And mystery, when held in the hand, has gravity. It pulls at the mind. It stirs the ancient places in us that remember before remembering. Perhaps these spheres are mirrors, not in reflection, but in question. Not asking what they are, but asking who we were meant to become. Imagine excavating one on a silent morning. Dust thick in the air. The chisel strikes, and from the red earth emerges not bone, not fossil, not ore, but a shape. Clean, closed, complete. And in that instant you know, this was placed, not found. And the earth, once again, becomes stranger than fiction. Not because it hides monsters, but because it hides memories. The forest did not burn. Not in the way one expects. There were no flames, no rivers of lava, no slow consumption of underbrush. Instead, on the morning of June 30th, 1908, the trees simply fell. 80 million of them. Flattened in silence, one after another, as if bowed by an invisible hand. In the remote taiga of Siberia. Near the Podkamenia Tunguska River, something came from the sky. It did not land. It did not crash. It exploded. Witnesses described a streak of blue light, brighter than the sun, followed by a tremor that shattered windows and knocked people from chairs hundreds of kilometers away. The sky turned to fire. A shockwave circled the globe, not once, but twice. Atmospheric sensors in London recorded it. Barometers twitched in Berlin. In Washington, D.C., compasses trembled. But at ground zero? No crater. No meteorite. No fragment large enough to name. Only silence. And scorched trees standing upright in the center, stripped of branches and bark, their trunks charred but still vertical, as if something had pressed down from above with divine precision. The Tunguska event, as it came to be known, is the largest impact-related explosion in recorded human history. But there is no impact site. No familiar debris. No obvious culprit. Official explanations suggest an airburst, a comet or stony asteroid disintegrating at altitude. The energy release, estimated at 10 to 15 megatons, was equivalent to 1,000 Hiroshima bombs. And yet, so much doesn't fit. The object arrived from the east, with a shallow trajectory. Its chemical signature, detected decades later through soil and tree ring analysis, suggested volatile compounds, but not in ratios expected of typical meteoritic material. No unambiguous fragments were ever recovered. What, then, fell from the sky? Some say it was a comet, made of ice and gas, vaporizing entirely before contact. Others argue for a carbonaceous asteroid. Still others point to the pattern of destruction, a radial burst with a butterfly shape, and suggest more exotic possibilities. What if it was not a meteor at all? What if it was technology? An alien probe, perhaps, failing in its descent. A vessel caught in Earth's gravity and self-destructing before capture. Or an object of intention, a controlled detonation, a test, a message. Not meant to destroy, but to demonstrate. To be seen. Imagine the precision required to create a blast of that magnitude without leaving a single large fragment. To flatten forests but spare lives. To burn sky, not soil. Or perhaps it was something stranger still. A temporal rupture, a tear in time itself. A brief anomaly where energy from another dimension bled into ours. A pocket of impossible force leaking into the fabric of our atmosphere and vanishing just as suddenly. There are tales, too many to ignore, of lights in the sky seen days before the event, of strange atmospheric halos, of magnetometers behaving erratically across Europe. Some even speak of a second object, trailing behind the first, seen by indigenous hunters days after the explosion. Was it a companion? A rescuer? An observer? Others look to mythology. The Evenki people, native to the region, believed a god had descended, a thunderous spirit punishing the land. Their shamans spoke of celestial retribution, of a fire from the heavens meant to cleanse, not kill. And yet, the land has never fully healed. Even now, more than a century later, the zone remains haunted. Trees grow strangely. The soil is different. Animals avoid the center. There are whispers of mutation, of resonance, of some lingering echo in the earth beneath. In 1927, a Russian expedition finally reached the site. Led by Leonid Kulik, they expected a crater, or at least remnants. Instead, they found silence. Fallen trunks aligned away from a central point. No impact basin. No large rocks. Just devastation, symmetrical and unnatural. Kulik returned, and so did others. Still, the mystery held. Instruments failed. Compasses spun. And the more we learned, the less we understood. Today, Tunguska remains an anomaly. It fits no perfect box. Science leans toward a natural cause, and perhaps it is right. But even within that certainty, there is space for all. Because in that moment, brief, bright, and unexplained, the Earth reminded us of how vulnerable we are. How wide the sky is. How something we cannot see, predict, or prevent can arrive in silence, and rewrite the forest. Perhaps that is the true lesson. Not whether the object was alien, or ancient, or manufactured, but that we are not insulated. That the sky is not ours. It belongs to all things that drift. All wanderers. All wayward relics of forgotten stars. And sometimes, without warning, one of them chooses to arrive. Not to speak, but to mark. To leave a scar not on the skin of the earth, but on our understanding of it. The trees remember. The soil remembers. And in their quiet witness, the question remains. What came to Tunguska? And will it come again? Rain fell like prophecy. Not gently, but sudden and wide, staining the red clay roads of Polonnaruwa a dark, expectant brown. On that day in December 2012, villagers in central Sri Lanka watched the sky weep stones. A hail of fire, brief and unscheduled, rained upon rice fields and rooftops. Some ran. Others stared. Most dismissed it as another piece of the sky's casual violence. But in the days that followed, scientists examined the fragments. They expected silicates, perhaps carbonaceous compounds. Meteoric ash. But within the rocks, there were shapes. Microscopic. Intricate. Organic. Not patterns. Not fractures. Structures. What they found were forms that echoed diatoms, the single-celled architects of Earth's oceans, enclosed in a fossil-like matrix of carbon. Filigreed outlines. Tubular shells. Delicate symmetry etched into the brittle surfaces of something not born of this planet. These were not mere inclusions. These were remnants. Frozen traces of life. The meteorite samples were analyzed by Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe and his team, a longtime proponent of panspermia, the hypothesis that life is not isolated to Earth but seeded across the cosmos by comets and meteors. To him, this was not coincidence. It was confirmation. He suggested that the structures within the Sri Lanka meteorites were not just similar to microorganisms. They were microorganisms, fossilized, preserved, delivered. If true, it would mean that life, or the ancient memory of it, exists beyond Earth. That biology is not a rare accident of our conditions, but a pattern etched into matter itself, recurring wherever the elements find harmony. Of course, skepticism followed. The claim was extraordinary. Critics argued that the fossils could be contamination, earthly life, somehow introduced after the meteorite's fall. Others disputed the dating methods, the chemical signatures. But the fossils persisted. Scanning electron microscopy revealed complex walls, detailed pores, and a carbon-rich composition inconsistent with modern contamination. Some forms were hollow, with interior chambers suggestive of function, of respiration, perhaps, or nutrient flow. These were not scratches. They were blueprints. And then came the stranger question: if these are fossils, from where did they originate? The meteorites were identified as potentially originating from a cometary body, volatile, porous, fragile. The kind of vessel that could cradle microscopic life across light years, protected in ice, buried in dust, waiting for a planetary atmosphere to awaken it or a fiery descent to release it. But these were not living organisms. They were remnants, as if from a world long dead. Could they be the cast-off remains of a comet once alive, a celestial garden frozen mid-bloom? Or were they debris from a planetary biosphere erased by catastrophe, cast into the void, and caught by chance in Earth's gravity? What if these fossils are not accidental passengers, but intentional couriers? Biological messages, seeds of warning, codes in shell and spiral. One form bore a strange tail, a filament extending from a spherical body. Another appeared almost bifurcated, as though in the middle of cell division when time stopped. Yet another curled inward, a spiral within a spiral, echoing the golden ratio, that same silent symmetry found in galaxies and flowers alike. These shapes speak of life not bound by our definitions. Life that may never have known water, or sunlight, or carbon cycles. Life sculpted by other forces, in other gravities, beneath stars we do not name. Could these fossils be echoes of something that once breathed? And if so, is it still breathing somewhere? Imagine a world torn apart, not by war, but by time. Oceans boiled away, atmosphere gone, but its last breath flung outward in desperation. A final act not of escape, but of sharing. A grain of stone carrying the memory of complexity. Not intelligent life. Not machines or cities, but the raw potential from which all such things might arise. And now that memory lies buried in a lab, under microscopes, in university vaults, often forgotten between budget reports and academic feuds. But it waits, because it was alive. Or perhaps, it still is. Some panspermia models suggest not fossilized organisms, but dormant ones, capable of reviving under the right conditions. What if the heat of atmospheric entry was not death, but ignition? What if something in those Sri Lankan fields bloomed invisibly the moment the rocks struck soil? Not to infect, not to conquer, but to remember, to grow, to begin again. We search the stars for life. For technosignatures, for radio waves, for blinking lights on distant exoplanets. But life does not always announce itself with technology. Sometimes it arrives on the wind, in rain, in dust. Sometimes it waits in a stone until someone looks closely enough to ask the right question. In the microscopes of Colombo, in the shimmering electron scans published in quiet journals, there may be proof, not of aliens, not of monsters, but of something older. Older than us. Older than Earth. The breath before the first breath. And it fell into our hands. not with fire, but with memory. The wind never stops in Antarctica. It is a continent carved by silence and sculpted by time, where the snow is not soft but ancient, compacted memory, layered in glacial scrolls. There are places where no footsteps have ever fallen, where time forgets motion and light itself feels thin. And in that stillness, hidden beneath kilometers of ice, lie visitors from elsewhere. Meteorites. Thousands of them. Scattered like black whispers on the white expanse, drawn by the windless drift, preserved by cold, and revealed only when ice decides to release its grip. Antarctica is Earth's great collector, a natural pan for cosmic debris. When a meteor lands on this frozen continent, it does not sink. It rests suspended on snow that will harden and bury it gently, preserving it not for centuries, but for eons. And in 1984, one such stone changed the way we think about life itself. It was found on the Allen Hills, named ALH 84001, a Martian meteorite. Its isotopic signature matched that of gases trapped in the Martian atmosphere, as sampled by the Viking landers. A direct connection. A messenger from another world. And inside it, entombed in its mineral veins, were shapes. Tiny, linear, organic. Structures that resembled fossilized bacteria, microbial filaments, ovoid forms, carbonate globules. Patterns that bore haunting similarity to life as we know it. And yet, they were not from Earth. The announcement came in 1996. NASA scientists published their findings with reverence and caution. These might be microfossils. This rock from Mars, ejected by impact millions of years ago and carried to Earth by celestial chance, might hold evidence of life that once lived elsewhere. Life on Mars. The world trembled. The president addressed the nation. The media exploded. And then, silence. Because science does not move on waves of wonder. It trudges slowly, cautiously, through uncertainty. Skeptics challenge the findings. Could the formations be non-biological? Could the carbonate structures result from inorganic processes? Could terrestrial contamination have played a role? The answers were as elusive as the stone itself. But Allen Hills was only the beginning. Since then, thousands of meteorites have been recovered from Antarctica. Some carbonaceous, rich in organics. Some bearing amino acids, the building blocks of proteins. Some holding water-bearing minerals. And some still, with strange shapes under magnification, bubbles, fibers, tunnels. Not proof, but suggestion. What if these are not fossils, but relics of prebiotic chemistry? Ancient laboratories of early molecular symphony? Frozen laboratories from before Earth had even cooled? Or perhaps more than chemistry. Perhaps memory. Imagine a world, Mars, long ago, not barren and rusted, but wet. Alive with rivers. With shallow seas and warm rain. With microbial mats clinging to basalt and ice alike. A world where life flickered briefly, then died. Or perhaps, retreated. When that world was struck by asteroid, as it so often was, fragments of its crust would have been ejected into space, wandering for millions of years before gravity brought them to us. We think of meteorites as dead. But some are not. Some carry within them the residue of metabolism, the ratios of isotopes whispering of decay, of heat, of cycles. Some contain magnetite crystals, the kind produced by certain bacteria to orient themselves within magnetic fields. Crystals with a structure too perfect to be accidental. Could this be life's handwriting, scrawled on a mineral surface billions of years ago? Or is it an illusion, an echo of our desire, a reflection of our loneliness? Antarctica does not care. It keeps the stones. It waits. And every summer, When expeditions traverse its alien ice fields, they find more. And some of those stones smell strange when cut. The scent is not of earth, not of soil or decay, but of something older. Sharp, metallic, alien. Like the breath of a world we've never seen, caught in stone for 4 billion years. Could these scents be volatile organics? Preserved hydrocarbons from other worlds? Could these stones be vessels, not just of rock, but of stories? Stories without language, without voice, told only through pattern and absence. In some of the most primitive meteorites, scientists have found nucleobases, components of RNA and DNA, adenine, guanine, molecules that do not spontaneously form in rocks, molecules that suggest that life, or its architecture, is not a miracle, but a recurrence. If even the coldest, deadest fragments of the cosmos hold the alphabet of life, then maybe life is not rare. Maybe it is inevitable. Maybe it begins wherever conditions permit, and the universe itself is a great engine of genesis. A dreamer that dreams the same dreams, again and again, in dust, and water, and light. The Antarctic meteorites are more than samples. They are invitations. To wonder. To look again. Not just at the sky, but at what we call home. Because perhaps Earth is not unique. Perhaps it is one blossom in a field of invisible, sleeping seeds. And perhaps some of those seeds have already come home. Fallen quietly. Buried in white silence. Waiting to be touched. And finally, remembered. In the quiet rain of Oregon's misty hills, a giant rests. Still. Dark. Hollowed and pitted like something sculpted by eons of storm. It sits not where it first fell, but where human hands brought it, across centuries, across myths, across the fragile bridge between sky and soil. It is called the Willamette meteorite, and it is the largest of its kind ever found in North America. Over 15 tons of iron and nickel, hardened in the furnace of deep space, its surface marred by ancient chemical weathering that shaped it into a relic of alien beauty. It looks less like a stone and more like a broken vessel. A cathedral struck by lightning. Its surface is cratered with basins and chambers, each one deep enough to cradle water. Deep enough, perhaps, to once cradle prayer. Because long before science claimed it, long before museums turned it into an exhibit, the meteorite had already been named. By the Clackamas Chinook people, it was called Tamanawos, the visitor from the sky. To them, it was not metal. It was a sacred being. It was said that Tamanawos had healing powers. That water collected in its basin could cleanse wounds, purify spirits, restore balance. Warriors bathed in its pools before battle. The sick were anointed. The tribe did not see it as a curiosity, but as a companion. They did not ask what it was. They asked why it had come. And perhaps that is the better question. Because the Willamette meteorite is an anomaly. It was not found in a crater. No scars in the earth mark its fall. No fireball lit the night. It was simply there, lying gently in the Willamette Valley, resting like something that had always belonged. How it arrived remains a mystery. Geologists suggest it likely fell thousands of years ago in what is now Montana or Canada, then was carried by the Missoula floods, a cataclysmic series of glacial torrents that reshaped the Pacific Northwest. Icebergs the size of mountains tore across the land, dragging boulders and debris with them. The Willamette meteorite, caught in the ice, may have drifted like a ghost ship, finally coming to rest in the soil. But there is something unsettling about that explanation. Because the Willamette is not just large, it is deeply sculpted. Deep cavities carved into its body suggest long exposure to acidic water, a slow dissolution as if the meteor had been submerged for a very long time. Not in ice, not in flood, but in intention. Some say the cavities resemble skulls. Others say they resemble nests. Places where something once lived, or slept, or waited. And then there is the sound. Those who've stood close, especially at night, say there is a hum. Not audible in the traditional sense, but felt. A kind of presence. As though the iron remembers where it came from. As though it is listening. The Willamette meteorite likely originated in the asteroid belt, its metal born in the broken heart of a protoplanet, one that shattered in the early violence of our solar system's formation. In its composition are rare forms of crystalline iron, forms only forged in conditions of immense heat and pressure. To touch it is to touch something older than Earth. To run your hand across its surface is to brush against a silence that predates oceans. It has survived impacts, melting, deep space drift, and the weight of glaciers. And still it rests. But not without struggle. In 1902, a settler named Ellis Hughes found the meteorite, and claiming it as property, attempted to move it to his land using a wooden cart pulled by horses. It took months. He built a shack around it and charged admission. Eventually, the rightful landowner sued him. The case made its way through courts. In the end, the meteorite was moved again to New York, where it now resides in the American Museum of Natural History. But the Clackamas never forgot. To them, it had been stolen. And in 1999, after decades of silence, the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde formally requested its return. After negotiations, an agreement was reached. The meteorite would remain in the museum, but the tribe would retain spiritual rights. Each year, they are allowed private ceremonial access. To this day, they still come, still bring water, still whisper prayers. Because to them, it is not an object. It is a being. And perhaps, in some way, they are right. If the meteorite carries within it the memory of stars, of planets torn apart, of the ancient clash between gravity and light, if its body is a record, a container, a relic of things we will never see, then it is alive, not with breath, but with meaning. Some have proposed that the Willamette could be the remnant of an alien artifact, not by intention, but by ancestry. That it might be the shard of something once built, not formed. A fragment of a planetary engine. A lost core. A sliver of forgotten machinery now interpreted as stone. Others say that's just poetry. But what is science, if not poetry read slowly? The meteorite holds no script. No metal plates. No codes. Only weight. And presence. And silence. But silence is not absence. Sometimes silence is the message. Sometimes it says, I was forged in a place you will never see. I fell not to be found, but to rest. And still you found me. So sit. Listen. Bring your water. And remember, the sky does not forget. High above Earth, in an orbit colder than winter and darker than any storm, something drifts. It is not listed in official registries. It is not part of any known mission. It does not broadcast, nor blink, nor fall. It simply hangs, silent, black, and strange. They call it the Black Night. To some, it is a relic. To others, a sentinel. And to many, it is merely a myth. But every myth begins with a shadow. The legend of the Black Knight satellite begins with signals, radio bursts in the 1920s, detected by Nikola Tesla as he listened for cosmic patterns from his Colorado Springs lab. He recorded delayed echoes, radio waves bouncing back at intervals not explained by Earth's ionosphere. They were not terrestrial, he insisted. They came from elsewhere. From above. From something waiting. In the decades that followed, other anomalies whispered through the static. In 1954, newspapers claimed that the U.S. Air Force had detected 2 unidentified satellites orbiting Earth, before any nation had successfully launched one. The first official satellite, Sputnik, would not arrive until 1957. So what were these earlier signals tracking? Then came 1960. A mysterious dark object appeared in polar orbit, an orbit no nation had mastered. It was large, black, irregular. It moved against the grain of known satellites. Grumman Aerospace tracked it. Newspapers picked up the story. The Pentagon responded with vague denials. They claimed it was space debris from a lost satellite, that it was discarded casing. Space trash. Nothing more. But images were taken. In 1998, astronauts aboard the STS-88 shuttle mission photographed a strange object floating above Earth. Angular. Pitch black. Winged, almost. The photos, released by NASA, were labeled as thermal blankets lost during assembly. And yet the shape, cragged, sharp, unlike any human structure, seemed to defy explanation. The public looked. Conspiracy bloomed. And the legend grew. What if it was not debris? What if it was watching? The Black Knight is said to have circled Earth for over 13,000 years, long before any civilization etched its stories in stone. Some speculate it is a remnant of an ancient alien probe, placed here in a pre-human epoch to monitor Earth's development. A cosmic lighthouse. A recorder. A sentinel assigned to wait. Others imagine it as a warning system, sent not to observe us, but to signal them when we reach a certain stage. When we split atoms. When we leave the cradle. When we begin to speak across stars. If so, perhaps it has already sent its message. It does not blink. It does not fall. It does not speak. It simply continues. NASA has long since dismissed the object as debris, a misidentified thermal blanket torn free during EVA operations. The official explanation is grounded, plausible, and quiet. But the myth resists silence. Because the shape of the object in those photos, so asymmetric, so sharp-edged, so unlike human architecture, feels like it was built by a logic not our own. Like something that was never meant to be understood. And then there is its movement. Reports suggest it occasionally shifts. That radar pings reflect odd rotational anomalies. That it vanishes, then returns. Amateurs track it. Ham radio operators listen for it. Some claim it responds. Bursts of transmission, irregular pulses, faint harmonics unlike any known signal. Not proof. Just presence. Could this be a misunderstanding? A cloud of error drifting above Earth's atmosphere, shaped by coincidence and wishful thinking? Or could it be that the Black Knight is not singular, but symbolic? An archetype. A cosmic idea that something ancient watches us. That we are not merely alone beneath the stars. That intelligence, once born, does not let go. Imagine a civilization, millions of years ahead, spreading its instruments like seeds, planting watchers in orbit around every habitable world. Not to interfere, but to wait. To record. To archive. And perhaps, to listen. If the Black Knight is one of these, then it is not a ship. It is not a satellite. It is an eye. Unblinking. Tireless. Patient beyond comprehension. Its surface, if touched, might be cold as thought, smooth as glass, or covered in textures unknown to our metallurgy. Inside? Perhaps empty. Perhaps quantum. Perhaps alive. Or perhaps it is hollow only because it is full of memory. Of continents risen and sunk. Of creatures vanished. Of dawns not yet come. And still it waits. Not because it must, but because it was made to. Who made it? We may never know. But we know this. It has not fallen. And until it does, its silence will say more than any signal ever could. Because the most ancient messages are carved not in sound, but in shadow, and orbit, and myth. Beneath the cities, under the forests, below the oceans, deeper than light can reach and older than language, there is a record. Not carved in stone, but layered in sediment. A whispering archive of Earth's long breath. Every flood, every fire, every extinction, every bloom, pressed into time's slow geology like ink into parchment. And within those layers, among the grains of silt and ash and bone, are anomalies. Shapes too precise. Metals too refined. Structures too deliberate. Technofossils. That is the word some use. Fragments not of nature, but of manufacture. Not of biology, but of design. It begins with a question no longer confined to fiction. Could Earth have hosted a civilization long before us? Not merely thousands of years ago, but millions. Not Atlantis. Something far older. This is the root of the Silurian hypothesis, a real, peer-reviewed proposal by scientists Gavin Schmidt and Adam Frank. It does not claim that such a civilization existed. Rather, it asks, if one had existed, would we know? What would be left after 10 million years? Not buildings. Not paper. Not plastic. Even our strongest alloys would decay. Even nuclear waste would dissipate into the crust. But perhaps something would remain. The sediment remembers. Imagine drilling into an ancient seabed, pulling up a coarse sample from the Paleocene, 50 million years ago. The layer seems normal. Clay, calcite, silicates. But then, under electron microscopy, anomalies. Tiny spheroids of metallic origin. Particles fused by heat. Ratios of rare earth elements inconsistent with known volcanic processes. Not random. Not geologic. But patterned. Some are no larger than bacteria. Some resemble carbon nanotubes. Others look like fragments of something once part of a circuit, now crushed to unrecognizable ash. Too small to hold. Too strange to forget. Could these be technofossils? Not of our making, but of something before us? Not civilization as we understand it. Not cities. Not language, but industry. Tools. Fire. A world risen and erased before we were ever imagined. If such a civilization emerged and then vanished, consumed by its own machines, or swallowed by climate, or lost to orbital drift, its trace would not be in monuments. It would be in chemistry. Pockets of synthetic compounds buried in shale. Isotopic ratios suggesting fuel combustion. Unusual layering consistent with mining, or drilling, or perhaps something more exotic. And scattered within those layers, silicon fragments shaped like logic. There are already hints. Not proof, but suggestion. In deep cores taken from Greenland's ice, scientists have found particles fused by temperatures far beyond natural wildfires. In ocean sediments from the Eocene, traces of synthetic-like polymers, unexpected, unexplained. Even in coal beds formed from forests long before the first mammals, there are reports, unverified, controversial, of regular shapes. Cubes. Hexagonal meshes. Threads of unknown alloys. Too often dismissed. Too strange to publish. But always returned to in private, whispered among those who dig deeper. And then there are the parts, out-of-place artifacts found in mines, in quarries, embedded in solid rock. A metal sphere unearthed from Precambrian strata. A rod-shaped object recovered from a block of sandstone. Fossil imprints that show no known organism, but repeating lines. Hoaxes? Possibly. But not all. Some lack any clear origin. Some disappear from archives. Some are quietly reclassified and buried again. Because this is not a story science is ready to tell. Not yet. The idea that humans are the first intelligent species on Earth is comforting. It places us at the center, the culmination, the crown. But the sediment says otherwise. It does not flatter. It does not lie. It simply waits. And in its patience, it holds secrets we may never learn to read. What if Earth is not a beginning, but a middle? What if intelligence has flared up many times, briefly, brightly, then vanished again, like fireflies in the dark? Each time rising from chaos. Each time reaching too far. Each time burning out, leaving only dust. And each time, a few small traces remain. Not statues. Not satellites. But technofossils. The sediment does not forget. We just haven't learned how to listen. One day, perhaps, someone will. Not with a telescope, but with a sieve. Not in space, but in the silence of stone. And what they find will change everything. Not because it proves we are not alone, but because it proves we were never first. The Ural Mountains stretch like a spine across the heart of Russia, ancient, craggy, and indifferent. Their slopes are wrapped in mist and myth, worn by time but unyielding. Beneath their soil lie the oldest rocks on Earth, the scars of vanished oceans, and veins of metal that remember the world before words. And there, deep in the wilderness, something was found. Not fossils, not bones, but shapes. Perfectly engineered. In the 1990s, while conducting a geological survey near the Narada River, scientists uncovered something embedded in the rock. Tiny, coiled metal structures no larger than the width of a human hair. Buried up to 12 meters deep, they were lodged in sediment layers dated to be over 100,000 years old. They were not random. They were not geological. They were not organic. They were machined. Tiny spirals, conical screws, and cylindrical filaments made of tungsten and molybdenum, metals with high melting points and rare properties, used in modern electronics, aerospace engineering, and high-frequency devices. And yet, these things were found where no machinery should be. In strata that predate modern civilization. In deposits untouched by known human activity. Some were barely a micron thick, too small to be seen with the naked eye. Others were larger, still delicate. All bore the hallmarks of precise manufacture. They became known as the Ural micro-objects. And they made no sense. Analysis showed they were not the result of contamination or industrial waste. Their shapes were too uniform, too specific, too engineered. Their composition was exotic, optimized for thermal resilience and electromagnetic neutrality. But how could such technology be present in Pleistocene soil? Skeptics offered explanations. They might have fallen from nearby missile test ranges. They might be debris from space, scattered in the region over time. Some suggested they were parts of earthly devices, somehow buried or misdated. But not all the objects matched those claims. And some were too deep, too far below the surface, sealed by layers of undisturbed earth. What were they? And who, if anyone, had placed them there? Some researchers proposed an unthinkable idea, that the objects were implants. Not biological, but technological. Not within organisms, but within the Earth itself. Sensors, monitors, relays, devices placed to observe something. Not us, perhaps, but the planet. The notion was quickly dismissed by mainstream science. The artifacts disappeared into storage. Some were lost. Others were never seen again. But the idea lingers. What if these were not debris, but anchors? Imagine a probe, alien, silent, uninvited, entering Earth's atmosphere not to land, but to implant. To scatter its data-gathering tools across the surface of the world, embedding them deep into rock and riverbed, to monitor tectonics, magnetism, atmosphere, biology. And once embedded, these devices would rest. Quiet, dormant, waiting for a signal. Or perhaps, still transmitting? To whom? To what? We do not know. But if even one of those objects is genuine, truly anomalous, then the implications are vast. It means Earth was touched. Not merely watched from afar, but physically altered. Not by gods, but by tools. It means that we are not alone. And we never were. Some stories even suggest more. In whispers and classified footnotes, there are tales of similar objects found in other places, embedded in bone. In ice cores, in meteorites. Tiny spirals of unknown alloy, shaped not by accident but by intent. They are called nanites by some, technoseeds by others. And always they vanish, pulled into shadow, buried again. Because to accept them would unravel too much. Would shift the line between archaeology and exobiology. Between history and cosmic reconnaissance. Perhaps the Ural Mountains are more than just stone. Perhaps they are the skin beneath which something watches. And perhaps these micro-objects are the fingerprints it left behind. No one knows where they came from. No one knows if they were part of a network, a map, a warning. But they are not noise. They are not chaos. They are pattern. And the universe speaks in pattern. If these were truly implanted, not by us, not for us, then they are messages. Not in language, not in light, but in presence. A presence that says, we were here. We are still here. And we are listening. The mountains remain. The objects may return. And the earth remembers. It arrived without fire. No tail of ice. No gleam of exhaust. No warning. Just a shift in the silence of the solar system. A visitor, long forgotten by its origin, gliding through the void with no kin, no purpose we could name, and no trail to follow back. Its name is Imyamu, a word in Hawaiian meaning scout, or messenger from afar arriving first. And it was the first of its kind ever seen. Discovered on October 19, 2017, by astronomers using the Pan-STARRS 1 telescope in Hawaii. The object was first mistaken for an asteroid, just another drifting stone. But within days, the truth emerged. Oumuamua had not come from the solar system. Its path, its velocity, its angle, all betrayed it. It was interstellar. It came from no known orbit, no known cloud of origin. Its approach was hyperbolic, fast enough that no planet, no sun, no gravity well could have birthed it. It simply entered, bent around the sun, and then left. At 315,000 kilometers per hour, it slipped through our system, arcing around our star like a thought we were not meant to catch. But we caught it. Barely. For just a few weeks, before it faded again into the dark. And what we saw made less sense the more we looked. It was long, perhaps 800 meters, yet strangely flat, or perhaps cigar-shaped. The estimates changed with every model. Its rotation was erratic, tumbling on multiple axes, as if it were not solid, not stable, not natural. And then, it accelerated. As it left the inner solar system, Oumuamua picked up speed in a way no ordinary object should. There was no visible coma, no jets of gas, no sublimation of ices that would explain the thrust. And yet it moved, as if something inside had pushed, as if it had responded to the sun with motion, but no heat. No explanation satisfied the data. Comet? No. Asteroid? Unlikely. Avi Loeb, a Harvard astrophysicist, offered a bold suggestion. Perhaps it was artificial. Not a ship, not a probe, but a fragment of something built. A light sail, perhaps, thin and wide, driven by solar radiation pressure. A piece of alien engineering, drifting not with purpose, but with history. If true, Oumuamua would be the first known artifact of another intelligence. A relic adrift for millennia, perhaps ejected from a dying world or a forgotten fleet. And we were not ready. Telescopes strained. No image resolved its shape. No spectrograph clarified its composition. We only knew it had come. And gone. Too fast for intercept. Too distant for clarity. Too strange to be forgotten. Its surface was red, like many objects scorched by radiation. Its rotation did not match tumbling debris. Its brightness flickered in ways that defied explanation. And its silence was complete. No signal. No ping. No resonance of intent. And yet there was the name. Oumuamua. The messenger. As if we knew, instinctively, that this was not random. It may have crossed stars to reach us. A journey of 10 million years, or 100. And now it is gone, deeper into the black, outbound toward Pegasus or Cygnus or nowhere. We will never see it again. But its passage has changed us. Because now we know that the void is not empty. That things move through it. Old things. Strange things. Things that do not match the charts. If Oumuamua is natural, it is like nothing we've seen. If it is not, then we have already met the first fragment of something else. Not a visitor. Not a warning. Not a message. But a question. Left unspoken. Spinning still. Between the stars. There is a silence in the rock. A deep, unbroken stillness beneath the crust of Earth, where sediment stacks like memory. And in that silence is a question, whispered not by poets, but by geologists and astrophysicists. Were we the first? The Silurian hypothesis does not begin with conspiracy or fantasy. It begins with data, with layers of carbon, with isotopes and fossils and the curious things we don't find where we might expect to. Coined in a 2018 paper by NASA's Gavin Schmidt and astrophysicist Adam Frank, the Silurian hypothesis proposes a simple thought experiment. If an industrial civilization had existed on Earth millions of years ago, say, during the Paleocene or the Permian, would we know? Could we find evidence of such a civilization? Or would time, erosion, subduction, and chemical decay have erased it entirely? The answer is not comforting, because the deeper we look into Earth's past, the less we can say with certainty. Stone forgets quickly. The oceans churn. The crust folds in on itself, consuming entire continents, reshaping mountains, and exhaling forests into ash. What remains? Traces. Tiny clues in soil chemistry. Sudden shifts in carbon ratios. Unusual distributions of rare elements. In our own Anthropocene era, we leave clear signatures: plastics, aluminum, synthetic compounds, nuclear isotopes. But stretch that signature across 10 million years, and it begins to fade. Plastics decompose. Metals corrode. Buildings collapse and are devoured by fungi, root, and rot. Within 500,000 years, most of our cities would be unrecognizable. In 10 million, Only anomalies in soil chemistry might remain. So then, if we vanished, and another species rose 100 million years from now, what would they find of us? And if that question unnerves us, what if it has already happened? The Silurian hypothesis draws its name from a fictional premise in Doctor Who, where an advanced reptilian civilization existed in Earth's deep past. But the hypothesis is not fiction. It is scientific humility, an acknowledgement that deep time hides more than it reveals. Consider the Carboniferous period, over 300 million years ago. Earth was warm, lush, oxygen-rich. Forests stretched endlessly across supercontinents. Could a species have evolved intelligence then? Could they have used fire? Metallurgy? Written language? And if so, what would remain? A mine, a buried structure, a stratum of strange alloys, an isotope out of place. Even now, we find oddities. High-purity spheres in sediment, fused glass layers where no volcano erupted, isotopic spikes suggestive of combustion, not natural decay. Coincidence? Perhaps. But how would we know? In Egypt, we find temples buried in sand after 4,000 years. In Guatemala, cities lost to jungle in less than a millennium. Now stretch the lens. Look across 100 million years of tectonic movement, glacial erosion, and volcanic turnover. What does Earth remember? Not much. But enough, perhaps, to make us wonder. The Silurian hypothesis is not about proving a past we cannot see. It is about looking into deep time with open eyes. It is about humility. About recognizing that we are not the inevitable end of a line. That intelligence may rise and fall like tides. That our story may be a chapter, not the book. And if others came before, if they dug and built and wondered, as we do now, then perhaps they too looked down into the stone and asked, "Were we the first?" Perhaps the answer lies buried. Not in monuments, but in chemistry. Not in language, but in ash. Perhaps the planet has hosted not one flame of consciousness, but many. Each brief, each bright, each forgotten, except by the earth itself, which, in its stillness, records all, even the parts it hides. There is something in us that remembers water, not as thirst or storm or sea, but as origin, as witness. We build cities by the shorelines, whisper to the rivers, gaze endlessly into the ocean not just to see what lies beyond, but to recall what may have been. Atlantis. It is the name that endures above all others. A legend buried in Plato's dialogues, but older still in the roots of human longing. The idea that once, long before our time, there was a great civilization, vast, luminous, and wise, that fell. Not to war, not to time, but to the sea. But Atlantis is not the story of a single city. It is the name we give to every silence in the record. Every submerged ruin, every megalith out of place, every myth that speaks of a golden age drowned in thunder. It is the placeholder for what history refuses to confess. Could civilizations, real ones, have risen and vanished, their stories lost beneath oceans and floodplains, swallowed by tectonics and tide? We know the seas have not always been where they are. During the last glacial maximum, sea levels were 120 meters lower. A full third of today's continental shelves were exposed as habitable land. Vast plains, archipelagos, river deltas, all now drown beneath our modern coasts. Doggerland, for instance, an ancient land bridge between Britain and mainland Europe, once teemed with life and light. Now it lies under the North Sea. Stone tools have been dredged from its depths. Evidence of campsites, fire pits, hearths of memory. And then there's the Gulf of Khumbat, off the coast of India, where sonar surveys have revealed geometric patterns beneath the waves, rectilinear grids, stone foundations. Some say it is a submerged city. Others dismiss it as natural formation. But what if it is both? What if time wears intention into accident? What if every ruin becomes a reef, and every monument a myth? The Yanaguni Monument near Japan, a massive underwater rock formation with steps, terraces, and pillars, has sparked similar debate. Geological? Artificial? Tourist attraction? Or something more? We cannot agree. But the sea remembers. And in the Caribbean, in the Mediterranean, in the Bimini Road and the Azores, divers and satellite eyes find patterns in the deep. Circles of stone. Pavement-like formations. Walls too linear for chance. Even in Antarctica, beneath the ice, anomalies await explanation. Radar scans hint at buried structures beneath the frozen desert. Impossible symmetry. Right angles where none should exist. And always the question remains: if a civilization vanished beneath the sea, how would we know? How long before salt erased its ink? Before barnacles made script unreadable? Before sediment sealed every street? The answer, again, is uncomfortable. Not long. A few thousand years would suffice. Even less in some places. And so the record becomes a palimpsest, written, erased, rewritten. Our myths the faint charcoal marks beneath the printed page. Many cultures speak of a flood. The Sumerians, the Greeks, the Chinese, the Maya, the Hopi, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Book of Genesis, the story of Deucalion. Different languages, different continents, same shape, a great flood, a world lost, a few survivors drifting on wood or stone or memory. Are these stories coincidence? Or are they inherited trauma? Geological memory, passed down in story and scar? The Earth has known catastrophe. Asteroid strikes, volcanic winters, magnetic reversals, rapid sea level rise. Any one of these could extinguish a culture. Not the planet, just the page. Erase the story. Leave behind only silence and salt. And so we name it Atlantis. The word we whisper when we find what we cannot explain. When we see precision in the wrong strata. When we hold a tool that doesn't belong. What if Atlantis was real? Not in the way Plato wrote it. Not as a utopia. But as a pattern. Civilizations rise. They build. They shine. And they vanish. Not always with fire. Sometimes with water. And the sea keeps their secrets. Until we ask the right question. Until we dive, not just into the ocean, but into doubt. And in that descent, we find not just ruins, but reflection. Because Atlantis isn't just a city. It's a warning, a mirror, and maybe a memory that still lives in us. Drowned, but never gone. There are machines we no longer remember. Not because they are ancient, but because they are buried. Not beneath dust, or sand, or ruin, but beneath time itself. If you were to peel back the earth like a book, page by page, past the Anthropocene, past the Holocene, past the Pleistocene ice, you would eventually reach a chapter with no ink. A long silence. A darkened epic, folded in pressure, crushed into stone. And perhaps, hidden in that silence lie fragments. Not fossils, but techno-signatures. Traces of machinery. Imprints of manufacture. Evidence not of life, but of intelligence. The search for techno-signatures has long been aimed skyward. Radio telescopes scanning for whispers. Infrared arrays measuring waste heat from hypothetical Dyson spheres. Optical lenses focused on flickers between the stars. But what if the real technosignatures are beneath us? In the shale. In the ore. In the forgotten folds of the Earth's own body. Imagine a civilization not human. Not mammalian. Perhaps not even vertebrate. Imagine it rose during the Carboniferous, or the Devonian, or some nameless interval between extinction events. It developed metallurgy, energy systems, perhaps even computing. But it burned bright and short. Volcano. Famine. Atmospheric collapse. 100,000 reasons. It fell, and left behind only footnotes. But the Earth does not forget everything. We already search for technosignatures in exoplanets, chemical imbalances, heavy metals in the atmosphere, patterns that biology alone cannot produce. So why not here? Why not examine our own planet with that same cold, distant gaze? Geochemical anomalies exist. Spikes of lead, carbon ratios hinting at synthetic combustion, unusual concentrations of rare earth elements. In certain layers where no known civilization should have been, there are strange isotopes. Artificial in nature, not products of geology or biology, but of design. And then there are the objects. Tiny, often dismissed. Found in coal seams, in core samples, in metamorphic stone. Metallic spheres. Polymerized residues. Silicon fragments that resemble chips, though eroded past recognition. Even now, some researchers in fringe corners of academia, engineers, metallurgists, geologists with the taste for mystery, catalog these things. They are not proven. They are not accepted. But they are found. Could they be ancient machines? Not intact, but broken. Reclaimed by sediment, chewed by time, reforged into the body of Earth itself. Imagine a nanomachine, billions of years old, embedded in quartz. Dormant. Dead. Or perhaps still functioning, on cycles so long we cannot detect them. Imagine a processor the size of a grain of rice, powered by ambient magnetism, recording, waiting. Forgotten not just by us, but by its makers. And then consider this. We are building machines now, self-replicating, autonomous, silicon-born, that may outlive us. What if someone else did the same? And what if the Earth is now host to their remnants? Could that explain the odd mineral inclusions found in deep mines? The strange resistive patterns in certain ancient rocks? The symmetry within crystal formations that should be random? Not mistakes. Not miracles. But messages. Encoded not in language, but in material. What if Earth is a palimpsest, rewritten again and again, yet still faintly imprinted with blueprints we did not draw? What if somewhere, under the oldest mountain, buried deeper than any drill has reached, a machine still turns? Not to speak, not to move, but simply to be. A memory of a world that built it. A tomb for thoughts we will never think. A whisper in iron, caught in the lungs of the Earth. This is not fantasy. It is extrapolation. It is what happens when we ask the question not as explorers, but as inheritors. Because maybe we are not the first to stand upright. Not the first to look up. Not the first to build. Just the first to find the ruins and not recognize them. The next time you hold a stone, feel its weight. Feel its silence. It may be more than geology. It may be the memory of a machine that forgot its name. There are voices in the dark. Not in words. Not in language. But in rhythm. In pulse. In sudden bursts of energy that cross galaxies in less time than it takes a heart to beat. They're called fast radio bursts, FRBs, and we do not know what they are. Discovered in 2007 by accident. While combing through old data, they arrived as single, brilliant flashes of radio light. Each one lasting only milliseconds. Each one releasing more energy than the sun does in days. For years, they came alone. One here, one there. Too fast to track. Too faint to trace. Some doubted they were even real. Then, more arrived. Some repeated. One of them, FRB 121102, flashed again and again, like a cosmic heartbeat. And it came from a dwarf galaxy, 3 billion light years away. 3 billion years. Before Earth had trees. Before mammals. Before breath. That signal had already begun its journey. And now we listen. The sky is filled with these bursts, hundreds, perhaps thousands a day. Some from nearby galaxies. Some from deep, primordial corners of the cosmos. All different. All unexplained. What causes them? No one knows. Theories bloom and collapse like waveforms. Magnetars, neutron stars wrapped in magnetic fields a quadrillion times stronger than Earth's, might crack and flare like cosmic tendons snapping. Or colliding black holes, tearing space like silk. Or something stranger. Some of the signals show structure. Frequency sweeps. Polarization. Chirps that rise and fall as if singing. Patterns that resemble encryption, not because they are, but because our minds hunger for design. What if some of them are design? What if 1%, just one, carries not energy, but intention? Imagine a civilization dying beneath a red star. Too far for travel. Too late for rescue. But still able to scream into the dark. Not to call for help, but to be remembered. A flash. A signal. A mathematical melody that says, "We were here." Or maybe they are not messages. Maybe they are beacons. Or warnings. Or triggers. Or the exhaust of something far beyond us. Cosmic machines working across quantum scales, blinking light across galaxies like lighthouses for vessels we will never see. In 2020, one FRB came from inside the Milky Way. From a known magnetar. Proof, perhaps, that nature can make these sounds. But still, the others come. Too many. Too fast. Too strange. Some even arrive on patterns, repeating every 16 days. Like tides. Like breath. As if something is rotating. Or orbiting. Or remembering. We aim our arrays, build telescopes larger than stadiums, algorithms sharper than bone, all to catch these whispers. And when we do, the data falls like snow. Silence broken by a crack. A chirp. A wave. And for a moment, it feels like someone has called our name. The universe is loud. But it is also lonely. And these bursts, short, brilliant, uninvited, feel like knocks on the edge of our knowing. Are they natural? Maybe. But what if one isn't? What if we've already received the first reply? And just haven't learned how to listen? The signals keep coming. And we keep listening. Because even if there is no message, no author, no meaning, still they are beautiful. Still, they remind us that the sky is not silent. That the dark between stars is not empty. It is filled with something. And maybe, one day, that something will say hello. There are rocks that feel alive. Not in the way a seed feels, curled with future. But in the way a scar does, quiet, permanent, and full of story. In the layered tombs of ancient seabeds, nestled within the silent crush of limestone and clay, lie patterns that do not fit. Circular imprints. Geometries too regular. Fossils of something not alive. They are not bones. Not shells. Not trilobites or coral. They are forms without faces. shapes without ancestry, structures that look not grown, but built. And so they are called technofossils. Not because we know they are machines, but because they resemble them. Tiny disks, embedded in Permian rock, parallel striations etched into Cambrian shale, traces of copper where no biology demands it, cores, spindles, rings, objects that defy biology, yet appear fossilized nonetheless. Some suggest they are mineral anomalies, formations born of pressure, erosion, coincidence. But coincidence, when it repeats, begins to resemble language. What if these are the wreckage of memory? Not ours, not even Earth's, but of something older. A civilization not made of flesh and fire, but of geometry. One that left no statues, no art, no text, only function. And when it fell, perhaps by war, or silence, or choice, it left behind no ruins, only shapes. Shapes the earth slowly folded into herself, like leaves into soil, like stars into black holes, like names into myth. Some of these patterns are fractal. They repeat across scale. A ring of 5 millimeters matches one of 5 microns, as if echoing something deeper than structure, something like intent. Could a machine be made to fossilize? Could it be designed to die in a way that mimics nature, so that when found, it would confuse the mind, but stir the intuition? Or were these shapes not meant to be found at all? Were they simply lost in a storm? Swept into mud, drowned in flood, caught in sediment, forgotten? And only now, with microscopes and algorithms and a hunger that spans galaxies, do we begin to notice. In 2011, a geochemical survey of an ancient shale formation revealed particles composed of alloys not found in natural processes, metals combined at ratios too precise, melting points too high, to be mere volcanic residue. They were ignored, filed as contamination, but the core samples were sealed, dated, verified. The layers had not been touched in 300 million years. So what, then, is the origin? If not us, who? If not now, when? Some theorize these are not remnants of a terrestrial intelligence, but inclusions, objects from elsewhere, seeded into Earth by comet or asteroid, carrying with them fragments of technologies from other stars. A form of cosmic archaeology, where planets are not built civilizations, but burial sites. Imagine a machine, small as a virus, surviving the collapse of its parent world, hitching a ride on interstellar rock, and embedding itself in the soft soil of a young Earth. Not to thrive, not to speak, but simply to persist. And now, billions of years later, it is unearthed, not as circuitry, but as fossil. Not alive, but still designed. It is possible these forms are natural, that pressure and mineral flow and crystal habit can deceive the eye, that we see intent where there is only chemistry. But it is also possible that these shapes are not illusions, that they are survivors of a kind of life we do not yet understand, a life that does not breathe, does not eat, does not die, only transforms and waits. The fossil record is full of gaps. Creatures appear, fully formed, and vanish. Mass extinctions, genetic bottlenecks, bursts of evolution with no clear cause. Perhaps the missing pages are not missing. Perhaps they are sealed inside the stone, written not in DNA, but in design. And we are only now learning to read it. Not with biology, but with memory. Not with microscopes, but with wonder. So when you next see a rock smoothed by time, veined with ancient pressure, ask yourself, is this the skin of the earth? Or is it the skin of something that once dreamed, and fell, and fossilized? And perhaps, in the deepest layers of silence, Its echo remains. They could be here already. Not in orbit. Not in the sky. But here. Perched on asteroids. Tucked within Trojan points. Hidden among the silent rocks that drift alongside Earth as if nothing is unusual. These are the lurkers. The term, coined by astronomer Ronald Bracewell and revived in modern SETI thought, describes a kind of hypothetical probe. Not one sent to make contact. Not a beacon. Not a voyager. But a watcher. A silent sentinel placed in orbit, or on a moon, or on a passing rock. Not to move. Not to speak. Only to observe. And perhaps, to wait. The logic is unsettling in its simplicity. Why would an advanced civilization waste energy broadcasting into the void when it can plant a tiny, durable observer near a target world, and listen for millennia? After all, Earth has been emitting detectable radio signals for just over a century. But we've been biologically interesting for billions of years. Our atmosphere has been whispering oxygen since the Cambrian. Our spectrum has screamed life across space long before we built cities. So if someone was looking, they had time. Plenty of it. A probe could have been placed in our system before we walked upright. It could be older than language, older than mammals, older than bones, and it would not need to be large. A few meters, camouflaged in rock, thermally quiet, electromagnetically inert. It would watch, catalog, perhaps even move, between orbits, between moons, from Lagrange point to Lagrange point, staying always behind the curtain of our attention. And even now, we are just beginning to look. The Breakthrough Listen initiative has begun to aim its sensors not just at stars, but at near-Earth objects. Dead satellites, captured asteroids, objects in co-orbital resonance. Because if a lurker exists, it might be there. Perhaps on 2016 HO3, a quasi-satellite that dances with Earth, always near but never landing. Perhaps on Kamalawa, an asteroid no wider than a skyscraper, eternally looping in the shadow of our orbit. Perhaps on the moon's far side, shielded from our radio noise. We send our own probes now, Voyagers, pioneers, tiny chips propelled by light. Is it so strange to imagine someone else did the same, long ago? Not to talk, not to land, but to listen, and perhaps to judge. Some believe these probes are not passive, that they may wake when triggered, not by movement, but by behavior. Nuclear detonations, atmospheric shifts, the first breath of AI, the detection of exoplanets, moments that signal. They are becoming visible. And if so, what happens next? Do they announce themselves? Or send signal home? Or do nothing at all, having already sent word long ago? Some even suggest that artifacts have already been found. Strange metal objects in orbit. Unidentified debris, photographed, then reclassified. Anomalous shapes in lunar survey images. These are not proven. They are not confirmed. But they persist. Because the idea persists. That we are not alone. That we have never been alone. And that what we call silence may only be disinterest. Or patience. The lurker, if it exists, is not a threat. It is a mirror. Waiting to be seen. Waiting to see how we change when we know we're being watched. Because maybe that is the test. Not what we build, but what we become. And when we find it, perhaps half buried on a gray moonstone, or glinting beneath Martian dust, or hidden in the spinning silence of a Trojan asteroid, we may finally ask, who sent you? And the answer, if it comes, will not be words. It will be time. Measured not in seconds, but in silence. And orbit. and the long memory of watchers. There are stones that do not belong, walls too precise, chambers too dark, monoliths too vast for the hands that built them. Across the planet, scattered like ash from a forgotten flame, stand structures whose names have outlived their makers. Sacsayhuaman, Gobekli Tepe, Baalbek, Nan Madol. Structures too old to be remembered, yet too perfect to be dismissed. We attribute them to ancient peoples. We carve timelines to fit them. We say, they had more knowledge than we knew, and we leave it at that. But what if the truth is stranger? What if some of these megaliths are not monuments, but messages? The myth of the builders is not a single theory, but a persistent question. What if Earth was seeded not only with life, but with instruction? Not a blueprint, but an invitation. Imagine a civilization, not ours, and not recent, visiting Earth in its youth. They do not colonize. They do not terraform. They sculpt. A few stones. A few alignments. A few impossible feats left not for function, but for memory. Anchors in time. Not to be understood, but to be remembered. And when the next intelligence arises, be it ape, or dolphin, or something we've never named, it will find those stones. It will ask questions. It will feel wonder. That is the design. Consider the trilithons of Baalbek, monolithic stones over 800 tons, carved and transported with methods still debated. Or the H blocks of Puma Punku, cut with precision into interlocking joints, angles near perfect. They were betraying age far older than inked history allows. These aren't just big. They are precise. And silence surrounds their creation. No scrolls. No myths. No names. What civilization builds something it does not name? What species carves a temple with no god? Some propose that we are misreading time. That the builders were not of this age, but of one before. A cycle of civilizations, rising and falling, each time leaving a little more behind. Stone outlasts fire. Geometry outlasts story. And perhaps the deepest story is hidden in shape. Not in the writing of the builders, but in their absence. We are told, aliens didn't build the pyramids. And perhaps they didn't. But perhaps someone else did. Not extraterrestrial, but extrahistorical. An intelligent species, not human, but native to Earth, long extinct. Avian, reptilian, insectal. Why not? Life has had hundreds of millions of years to try. Why assume it only tried once? And in their last moments, seeing extinction come, by ice, by ash, by their own hands, they chose to build. Not tombs, not palaces, but questions. What remains? Shape, orientation, stone aligned with stars long dead. What if the stars were part of the message? Not gods to worship, but coordinates. We still find star maps and petroglyphs. Spirals carved into cliffs. Ceiling stones marked with lunar calendars thousands of years before modern math. Why? Why does every ancient culture, separated by ocean and time, turn their gaze to the heavens and build upward? Ziggurats, pyramids, stone towers, staircases to nowhere. The myth of the builders suggests they were not trying to reach the stars. They were trying to remember them. To say, we saw them. We were here. This is the sky as we knew it. And maybe, this is when you will return. Because the builders might not be gone. Only silent. Or distant. Or waiting. Some believe their technology was not metal, but resonance. Stone vibrated to shape. Architecture as acoustic device. Temples as harmonics. Structures that sang. That healed. that spoke without words. And we dismantled them, reused their bricks, buried them, laughed at them, but still they hum. Beneath jungles, beneath cities, beneath our certainty. So the next time you see a ruin, half swallowed by moss, or scorched by sun, or crumbling on a nameless hill, ask yourself, was this a home? A temple? A machine? Or a message meant for eyes that do not yet know how to see? And if the builders are out there, they are still watching, not from ships, but from stone, from shadow, from the long memory of the earth itself. The stars are still out there, burning, watching, listening, just as they were before we rose, before we named them, before we dared to whisper back. And now, here we are, surrounded not only by telescopes and theories, but by something stranger. Evidence without explanation, whispers in the stone, shapes in the ice, signals in the void, fossils that don't belong, all pointing to something other, not quite visible, not quite gone. We are a young species, so recent, we barely understand how recent. One breath in a cosmic hour, one thought in a silence 10 billion years deep. But in that thought, we remember. We remember not events, there are none to recall, but intuitions. The way our bones react to monoliths. The way certain numbers feel familiar. The way we are drawn to the sky, as if something up there remembers us too. All of this, the meteorites, the technofossils, the interstellar visitors, the floods and ruins and orbits, none of it is proof. And yet, together, they form a constellation of mystery. A map made not of stars, but of possibilities. It could all be coincidence, randomness, our need for pattern projected onto the unknown. But the unknown has shape, has depth, and sometimes it has questions so precise they feel like answers. What if the Hypatia stone really is older than the solar system? What if alien fossils rained down in Sri Lanka? What if the Tunguska explosion wasn't a meteor, but something else entirely? What if a probe watched us before we learned to count? What if Atlantis was not a place, but a pattern? In the absence of proof, there is a strange kind of peace, a reverence. Because speculation, when done with wonder and care, is a form of listening. And perhaps that is what the universe has been waiting for all along. Not arrogance, not conquest, just ears and questions. And now we are learning to ask them again, not as conquerors, but as heirs. Because this planet is old, and the silence of its rocks is not empty. It is simply waiting for the right shape of mind to hear. One day we may dig deep enough, listen sharply enough, dream wildly enough to uncover something truly impossible. And on that day, we won't be alone anymore. Not because we have found someone else, but because we have remembered that we are already part of a story far older than us. A story carved in orbit and ice. A story told not in words, but in presence. And when the stars blink back for the first time, not as mystery, but as memory, we will understand. We were never just watching the universe. The universe was always watching us too. Beneath the frozen skin of Jupiter's moon Europa, something stirs. Not a roar, not a quake, but a rhythm, subtle, cyclic, pulsing beneath kilometers of ancient ice. Europa is silent from above. Its surface is a braided wasteland of cracks and ridges, stretching in tangled maps across a world of frost. No mountains, no rivers, no craters that hold for long. Because the surface is young. It breaks. It melts. It heals. And under that skin, there is an ocean. An entire ocean. Not a pocket, not a briny lake, but a global sea, possibly twice the volume of all Earth's water. Kept liquid not by sunlight, but by tidal flexing, Europa is pulled and squeezed by Jupiter's immense gravity, generating heat deep within. And where there is water and heat and time, there may be life. But what kind of life? That's the question that keeps returning in waves. Not plankton, not fish, not even the pale, eyeless worms of our own deep-sea vents. What if it's different? Not carbon-based, perhaps. Not even soft. What if it's architecture? What if something beneath Europa builds? The Galileo spacecraft detected strange electromagnetic emissions, low-frequency bursts that seemed to rise from within. Later, the Hubble Space Telescope captured images of plumes erupting from the surface, spraying water hundreds of kilometers into space. Like geysers. Or signals. Were they random? Were they venting pressure? Or were they timed? Some researchers have proposed seafloor hydrothermal vents on Europa, like those on Earth where life may have begun. There, on our world, ecosystems thrive without sunlight. Powered by heat, chemistry, and flow. Imagine Europa, lit from below. A world turned inside out. A sea where the sky is ice. A biosphere in reverse. And imagine it, populated. Not with creatures, but with systems. Living geometry. Biological scaffolds. Organisms grown like architecture. What if under Europa's crust are cities? Not like ours. Not planned. But grown. Self-organizing colonies. Living conduits for heat and minerals. Tunnels that think. Membranes that remember. No faces. No tools. No civilization we would recognize. But sentience nonetheless. Drifting. Breathing. Waiting. And what would they make of us? The ones above the shell. The surface noise. The watchers who do not dive. Perhaps they've already seen us. Felt the metal echo of Galileo. Watched the light curve of Hubble. Listened to the static of Earth's transmissions filtering through their ocean, distorted and cold. Or perhaps they have sent echoes. The plumes may not be accidents. They may be punctuation. Chemical bursts carrying code. Salt ratios arranged into syntax. Hydrated minerals as vocabulary. What if Europa speaks in geysers? And we have not yet learned to read the spray. A future mission will go. Europa Clipper. It will orbit. It will scan. It will listen. And when it does, what if it hears more than heat? What if it hears intention? Not intelligence, perhaps, as we define it, but agency. A world that builds thought from pressure. That sculpts memory from current. That grows meaning in the dark. And maybe a world that remembers something we forgot. Not technology, not conquest, but patience. Europa has waited. It may wait still. And beneath its frost, in the silent, secret ocean that never sees stars, there may be stories, not told in sound, but in salt, in flow, in fracture, in silence that does not sleep. We will send our ships, our drills, our instruments. But will we recognize the voice when it speaks back? Or will we scrape the ice, hear the echoes, and miss the meaning? Europa does not ask to be understood. It simply is. And beneath it, something waits. Not to be found, but to be heard. In the sands of the Sahara, there is glass. Not beach glass, not volcanic obsidian, not fragments from human flame, but something older, purer, formed by temperatures no earthly furnace could reach. It is called Libyan desert glass, and it is one of the most enigmatic substances on Earth. Scattered across the great sand sea near the border of modern-day Egypt and Libya, the glass lies in shimmering patches, honey yellow, translucent, hard as quartz. It is almost entirely pure silica, 98% or more, unlike anything produced naturally. To hold it is to feel frozen lightning. Smooth, cold, deceptively soft in the hand, yet forged in violence. But what violence? What furnace made this? For decades, the answer eluded explanation. Volcanoes do not burn hot enough. Lightning strikes can produce glass, but not in such volume. The scale of the field spans hundreds of kilometers. The purity defies casual melting. And then there's the silence. No crater. No confirmed point of impact. Just glass and absence. Some proposed a meteor airburst, like Tunguska, but far more ancient. An object exploding in the atmosphere, its heat pressing downward, flash melting the sand into vitrified pools. But where is the iridium? Where are the typical meteoritic residues? Why is the distribution so strange? Glass clustered in certain regions, scattered like it was placed, not sprayed. And then came the artifact. In Tutankhamun's tomb, archaeologists found a scarab carved from this very glass, fashioned into a jewel thousands of years ago. Worn by royalty. Revered. Not just for its rarity, but perhaps for its memory. Did the ancients know where it came from? Did they see the sky burn? Some legends speak of the day the sky wept fire, of desert wanderers who found the ground fused into crystal, of gods angry or divine light falling. Myths, perhaps. But myths are how we remember the things we cannot explain. And what if this wasn't impact at all? What if it was something else? What if the glass is a signature? Not an accident, but an imprint? Imagine an ancient probe, something not designed to land, but to sample. A kind of alien sterilization or survey technique. A beam of energy, not to destroy, but to measure. A cosmic scalpel. And the glass? A side effect. A footprint. In this theory, the glass is a residue of something artificial, an unknown energy source, a misfired mechanism, or even a purposeful act of transformation. A way to transmute the land. To leave a mark without making noise. No crater. No trace. Just glass, as if the sand itself had remembered the shape of heat. Or perhaps, the glass is older than the event. Perhaps it fell here. Ejected from the moon, or Mars, or somewhere stranger. Scattered across the Sahara by chance. A memory not of this planet's fire, but another's. And what of the isotopes? The ratios are wrong for volcanism. Some show signs of rapid cooling. Others suggest a moment of intense, targeted fusion. Could this be a weapon? Not of destruction, but of measurement? A heat map in glass? A kind of cosmic ink? A test? And then there's the silence. Always the silence. The glass does not speak. But it endures. It does not decay. It does not fade. It gleams under the desert sun like frozen sunlight. Like memory itself. We search for messages in stars. We build antennas to capture alien language. But what if the message is here underfoot? What if it is this glass? A physical signal. A substance encoded not in data, but in temperature. In molecular order. In light refraction. Perhaps it tells a story in spectrum. A tale we do not yet know how to read. Or perhaps it is a scar. Left not in war, but in curiosity. We look at the glass and see geology. But what if someone, long ago, looked at Earth and saw a mirror? Touched it. Burned it. Not to hurt, but to understand. And what they left behind was silence and beauty. and a question etched in glass. One we have only just begun to answer. A world smaller than a continent drifts in the cold glow of Saturn. Enceladus. A moon of ice. A sphere too white, too smooth, too still. Until you look closer. Then you see the fractures. The vents. The geysers. Water, light, and heat erupting from the South Pole in radiant plumes, shooting into space like breath held too long. Not random. Not rare. But rhythmic. Every few hours, every cycle of orbit, the geysers return. A hidden engine pulses beneath the frost. Cassini saw it. The spacecraft that circled Saturn for over a decade flew through these plumes. Tasted them. Sampled the vapor, the salts, the grains of ice. And what it found was strange. Molecular hydrogen. Ammonia. Simple organics. Compounds that do not belong on the surface. They came from within. From an ocean beneath the ice. An ocean with energy, chemistry, and silence. Enceladus is only 500 kilometers wide. You could cross it in a single afternoon on foot, if not for the cold, the dark, the gravity so weak you might forget the weight of your own body. And yet beneath this small world is a sea deep enough to hold secrets older than our species. No sun. No tides. Only heat, and salt, and time. Imagine an ocean untouched for billions of years. Black. Still. Teeming. Not with creatures we would recognize, but with potential. Cells that shimmer. Structures that pulse. Organisms that cling not to light, but to warmth. If life exists here, it would be alien in every way. Blind. Cold adapted. Driven by chemistry we have not yet tasted. Or perhaps it does not live, as we define it. Perhaps it grows. Thinks. Remembers. What if the walls of Enceladus breathe? What if its ocean is not habitat, but mind? What if the very pressure of water against the ice is a language? A signal. Waiting to be read. Cassini could not see below the shell. Its instruments only caught glimpses. But what it saw was enough. Enough to say, there is something here. Enough to make us wonder. If we send another probe, one that drills, one that listens, will it find not just life, but intention? Not movement, but meaning. Because Enceladus is not just geologically active. It is alive in a way we do not yet understand. Its surface heals. Its geysers repeat. Its orbit is perfect. And the ocean beneath may not be silent. There are theories of intelligent oceans, of distributed minds, of thought not bound to skull or nerve, but suspended in salt water, flowing in temperature gradients, in chemical waves. If this is true, then we must rethink everything, because that would mean intelligence is not rare, not a miracle, but a property, something that emerges wherever time, energy, and complexity are allowed to dance. And Enceladus has danced for a long, long time. Some believe its plumes are invitations, or mistakes, or exhalations of thought. That what we see as water is actually voice, encoded in vapor, in mineral ratios, in molecular alignments. If we knew how to listen, truly listen, perhaps we would hear a greeting, or a memory, or something older than either. But for now we watch, we model, we prepare. The next mission may come within decades. It may land. It may melt its way downward. And when it does, it will not find silence. It will find pressure, current, pulse. It will find a world that waited. And it may ask, "What took you so long?" Because some oceans are not meant to be sailed. Some are meant to be remembered, and some are meant to remember us. There are moons that should be there, not imaginary ones, expected ones. Moons predicted by models, by motion, by the ancient logic of orbits. But they are not anymore. Only absence remains. Mercury has none. Venus has none. Even Earth, it is believed, once had more than one. Mars has two, Phobos and Deimos, but they are strange, misshapen, captured. Where did the others go? Were they shattered? Stolen? Or removed? The inner solar system, by all accounts, is too empty. Planetary formation predicts chaos, objects colliding, coalescing, forming moons in abundance. So where are the rest? Some suggest they were consumed by the sun, by planetary gravity, by impact. Others whisper of something else, something that came and took them. It begins with echoes, gravitational anomalies, crater patterns inconsistent with known impacts, orbital shifts that require explanation. And then there are the scars. Earth bears one in particular, the moon itself, formed, we believe, by a collision with a Mars-sized object billions of years ago. The debris coalesced into our companion, and the Earth was changed forever. But what was the other object? Where did it come from? And why does the moon seem just so perfect? Its size, relative to Earth, is anomalous. Its stabilizing effect on our tilt, crucial for climate and life, is uncanny. Its distance, drifting slowly away each year, is precise. Its influence immense. Was this coincidence? Or intention? There are theories, fringe, quiet, whispered, of ancient planetary engineering, of celestial architects who sculpted orbits like gardens, who planted moons, removed others, shaped the flow of time by shaping the tides. Too much? Perhaps. But consider this. Some ancient cultures speak of times before the moon. Sumerian texts, Native American legends, even old Greek sources reference a world without it. Not myths, but memories. And Mars? Its moons are odd, too small, too irregular, likely captured asteroids. But their orbits are decaying. Phobos will crash into Mars. Deimos may drift away. Transient, unstable, almost as if temporary. Placeholders, or warnings. And then there's Venus, a world that spins backwards, slowly, almost stopped. Its day longer than its year. Was it struck? Braked? Reset? Some models suggest Venus once had oceans, a temperate climate, even potential for life. Now it's a furnace, a pressure cooker, and it has no moons. Why? If you were to erase a civilization, a world of life, of technology, of presence, and leave no trace, what would you take? Its sky, its tides, its rhythm, its moon, and Mercury, closest to the sun, scarred, lifeless, tidal locked in part. No moon, no atmosphere, no memory. Or so we believe. But what if we're only seeing the aftermath? What if the early solar system was not just chaotic, but curated? A garden pruned, a laboratory reset, a stage set again and again until the conditions were right, until Earth, until us. It would not take much, just time, and patience, and gravity. A probe large enough, intelligent enough, could alter moons, redirect asteroids, quiet a world. All without fire, without footprint, only with motion. And maybe that's what happened. Not war, not accident, but adjustment. A subtle shaping of the inner system, until only one moon remained. Large, stable, perfect, and with it, a world ready for light, for life, for us. This is speculation. Yes. But sometimes the gaps in the story tell more than the chapters we keep. Sometimes, absence is the artifact. And in the case of the missing moons, maybe the silence of the sky is speaking more loudly than we've ever dared to hear. Everything we know may be temporary. Not just our cities, our bodies, our civilizations, but the very laws of physics. What if gravity, light, and time are not constants, but conditions? The way a dream has rules, until the moment it ends. This is the concept of the false vacuum, a theoretical state of our universe, not the lowest possible energy, but a local minimum. Stable, yes, but not final. A bubble in a wider sea. A room within a mansion whose other doors remain locked. In physics, the vacuum is not empty. It is a field. It has shape, energy, tension. It defines how particles behave, how matter forms, how light moves, how atoms exist. But what if our vacuum, our field, our foundation, is not the true floor of reality? What if beneath it there is another level? A true vacuum, more stable, more fundamental. And what if our universe is only temporarily balanced atop this false plateau? The unsettling part is not the theory itself, but the consequences. Because if somewhere, in the vast, unreachable fabric of space, a quantum event caused even the smallest portion of reality to decay into the true vacuum, it would expand, instantly, at the speed of light. Not an explosion, but a rewriting. Everything we know, forces, particles, structures, would unravel. Not burned, not shattered, but simply redefined, unmade. A new physics would emerge behind the wavefront. New laws, new possibilities, new constraints. And we would never see it coming, because it would arrive as fast as causality allows. Faster than any warning. No telescope could detect it. No bunker could survive it. It would be like a new universe blooming inside this one, consuming and replacing it, as if the stage itself had been swapped mid-performance. But here is where the question deepens. What if this has happened before? Not here, but elsewhere. What if there are pockets, bubbles, of new physics blooming across the cosmos, each invisible until they arrive? Some theorists suggest the multiverse is born this way. Bubble universes within a foam of quantum transitions, each one forming its own reality, with its own vacuum, its own constants. And our universe? Just one stable bubble in an ocean of others. Temporary. Waiting. The Higgs field, which gives mass to particles, may itself suggest we are not at absolute stability, that we may be teetering, unknowingly, on the edge of fundamental change. And yet, we live. Stars shine. Atoms hold. Time flows forward. For now. But then there are the anomalies. Regions of space with unexplained temperature gradients. Pockets of low entropy. The cold spot in the cosmic microwave background. A scar, perhaps, left by a brush with another universe. Or a wound, where the false vacuum was thinner, where something nearly came through. This is not fear. This is curiosity, pushed to its final edge. Because if our universe is temporary, so are its limitations. If we found a way to fall into the true vacuum, safely, we might access an entirely different kind of existence. One where thought and form are not bound by matter. One where intelligence is not biology, but vibration. Where beings do not build, but harmonize. Do not travel, but shift. Perhaps they already exist, not in distant galaxies, but in deeper physics, in the layers beneath what we call real. They would not communicate in radio, not in signals or pulses, but in constants, in fine structure, in the angles of quantum spin. Perhaps what we call anomalies are not errors, but messages from the true vacuum. Perhaps dreams, coincidence, intuition are not flaws in the mind, but echoes from a more stable reality. And if the bubble ever breaks, if the wave ever comes, perhaps it will not end us. Perhaps it will awaken us, not in body, but in pattern, in memory, as if we are not individuals, but configurations. And the next universe is the next verse? In a song still unfolding, we have been calling out for a long time, not in years, not in centuries, but in the language of light, in radio waves, in data packets, in coded pulses stretched across the void. And still, the universe is quiet, too quiet. This is the Fermi paradox, named for physicist Enrico Fermi, who once asked quite simply, "Where is everybody if the universe is vast and old and fertile? If life is not a miracle, but a tendency, then by now shouldn't it be everywhere? And yet we see nothing. No signals, no structures, no ships, only silence. It is not just the absence of contact. It is the presence of expectation, crashing against a wall of stillness. Thousands of exoplanets have been discovered, many inhabitable zones, many older than Earth, many with the raw ingredients for life, but no whispers, no hints, no echoes. Why? There are theories, some bleak, some beautiful. One suggests the Great Filter, a barrier in the path from simple life to complex civilization. Perhaps life rarely gets past microbes. Or perhaps civilizations destroy themselves before they learn to listen. Nuclear war, runaway AI, ecological collapse, silence, self-made. Another theory. They're listening too, and everyone is afraid to speak. The dark forest hypothesis, where the universe is like a forest at night, and every civilization is a hunter. Quiet, hidden, waiting. To speak is to risk being found, and perhaps being ended. So no one speaks, and the silence deepens. Others suggest we are in a zoo, observed, studied, quarantined, that Earth is a preserve, deliberately isolated, until we are ready. Ready for what? Understanding? Kindness? Or the simple wisdom of quiet wonder? Or maybe we are alone, truly alone, not because we are special, but because we are first. The first intelligence to arise in this galaxy. The first to build, to ask, to reach. If so, the silence is not absence, but potential, ours to fill. But there is another possibility, one stranger than fear or distance or death. What if they did speak, but not in sound, not in light, not in anything we recognize? What if their message is encoded in matter, in the shape of spiral galaxies, in the distribution of quasars, in the fundamental constants? What if physics is the message, the speed of light, the charge of the electron, the symmetry of the cosmos, all tuned not for life, but for communication. A kind of cosmic Rosetta Stone, written not in letters, but in law, and we, only now beginning to understand its grammar. Or maybe the message is older than us, carved into the DNA of all life, encoded in the hydrogen line, buried in the rhythm of stars. A seed, not a signal. The truth is, the silence may not be real. It may be an illusion, born of our limited ears, our narrow eyes, our assumption that intelligence looks like us. What if they are here? Not in ships, but in structure? What if dark matter is not lifeless, but conscious in a form we do not comprehend? What if time itself is a conversation, unfolding slowly, sentence by sentence, over the scale of eons? Then we are not being ignored. We are being answered, so slowly, that we have mistaken the reply for emptiness. Perhaps one day, we will learn to slow ourselves enough to hear, to listen not with machines, but with minds, widened by silence. Until then, we continue to send, not just data, but hope, curiosity, kindness, and maybe, just maybe, the silence is waiting for us to become the kind of being worth speaking back to. It lies buried deep beneath the surface, not in shadow, but in gravity. The South Pole, Aitken Basin, a colossal impact scar on the far side of the moon, stretches over 2,500 kilometers wide, one of the largest craters in the solar system. And at its center, beneath the layers of regolith and ancient basalt, there is something. A mass. Dense. Cold. Silent. Discovered through gravitational mapping, it revealed itself not by light, but by pull. A concentration of mass, perhaps 2.4 quintillion kilograms, so heavy it drags the moon's crust downward. A bruise that gravity itself cannot forget. But what is it? Some say it's merely metal. An asteroid core. The remnants of whatever body struck the moon to create the basin billions of years ago. But that explanation sits uneasily. The mass is too dense, too sharply defined. It does not behave like shattered iron, and there are no corresponding surface features. No ejecta fields. No radial fractures. It is as if the object did not strike the moon, but was placed within it, intact, sleeping, buried. Theories unfurl like frost. Some propose a natural anomaly, an upwelling of mantle material, rich in nickel or thorium. Others suggest it's a magnetic fossil, a remnant of a time when the moon had a dynamo. But a few, a very few, ask something stranger. What if it's a structure, not a building, but a machine? Not from us, not from Earth, not even from this epoch. Imagine a device the size of a mountain, built not to move, but to watch, to listen, to measure the tides of thought on nearby planets. A lurker, perhaps, an ancient probe designed not to announce itself, but to endure. If so, it has endured well. For billions of years it has hidden there, beneath regolith and silence, watching a planet transform from lava to forest, from bacteria to dreams. Some say it activated when we first touched the moon, when our boots disturbed the dust, and our voices crackled into the vacuum. Others believe it is still dormant, that it waits for a signal, from us, or from beyond. And some believe we have already triggered it. The data anomalies around the basin grow more complex. Magnetic fields fluctuate unpredictably. Radio waves echo with unexplained harmonics. Satellites lose calibration. Seismic instruments hum. Nothing overt. Nothing declared. But something building. What would such a machine be for? A warning system? A data archive? A seed vault of knowledge from a civilization lost? Or perhaps something older than civilization itself? A relic from before the stars aligned into galaxies. From a time when matter was still young. A device sent out like spores to every promising corner of the universe. To wait, not for life, but for intelligence, for the question. And when the question is finally asked, "Are we alone?" it answers, not with sound, but with presence. It was always there. We simply hadn't noticed. Until gravity whispered its name. And now we build missions, orbiters, landers, drills, to pierce the crust, to reach the mass, to uncover what lies beneath. But what if? What if the moment we reach it, it is already gone? Not physically, but functionally. Already transmitted, already awakened, or worse, already waiting for us to arrive. Not with tools, but with understanding. Because the moon has always been more than a satellite. It is our mirror, our pull, our ancient twin. And now we know it has a secret. A mass that does not belong. A whisper in gravity's language. A silence with shape. And as we prepare to dig deeper, to uncover what lies beneath, we must ask, will we find metal, stone, history, or will we find a door? One we didn't know we built ourselves, simply by wondering, what lies beyond the silence? They shimmer like shards of frozen thought. Saturn's rings. Not one circle, but thousands. Threads of ice, dust, and stone, dancing in perfect resonance. A structure vast, delicate, and possibly complex. We call them natural. Fragments of moons. Leftovers of collisions. The remains of something ancient, broken by gravity and time. But what if they are more? Not mere debris, but design. Some scientists have noted their impossibility. Saturn's rings are too clean, too bright, too stable. They should have collapsed long ago. They should have darkened with age, polluted by meteorites, shattered by entropy. And yet they remain, sharp, alive, watched. Cassini, the spacecraft that orbited Saturn for over a decade, revealed more than images. It brought anomalies. Structures within the rings that defy chaos. Wave patterns that echo with rhythm. Gaps that open and close. Ringlets that braid and unbraid with mechanical grace. And then there are the propellers. Tiny moons, unseen by camera, whose gravitational signatures carve moving holes in the rings. Invisible shepherds. Their paths repeat with uncanny precision, as if guided. But guided by what? Some theorists whisper of machines. Ancient dormant, built not to broadcast, but to maintain. Imagine an array of ring-like structures placed around a gas giant. Not for energy, not for communication, but for calibration, to measure time, to harmonize orbits, to observe gravitational waves, or perhaps to hide. What better place to bury a presence than in plain sight? A structure so massive, so obvious, we assume it must be natural. But the geometry, the angles, the resonance, they defy coincidence. Consider this. Saturn emits radio waves. Its auroras pulse. Its magnetosphere sings in frequencies. Cassini detected repeating patterns. Low-frequency emissions timed with ring movements. Almost like a metronome. Almost like a signal. but not a message to us. A conversation with something else. Or a song meant for the deep fabric of space itself. Could the rings be instruments? Could they be tuning forks for gravitational harmonics? Or mirrors, bouncing some deeper kind of light, some slower kind of sound? Then there's the mystery of their youth. Data suggests the rings are less than 200 million years old. A blink in Saturn's ancient age. So why now? Why so recently? Did something create them? Rearrange moons, orchestrate collisions, build the structure from chaos? And if so, for what purpose? Perhaps they are a warning. A signal that once something moved through here. Left behind a mark. A map. Or a trap. Some suggest the rings are memory. That they encode events. That each ripple, each wave, is a record. Not of matter, but of time. The slow rotation of civilizations. The rise and fall of watchers. The quiet rhythm of a galaxy turning. And Saturn? It listens. It holds. It does not answer. But it allows us to look. To wonder. To ask. What do we see when we look at the rings? Debris? Symmetry? Art? Or the edges of a machine too vast to grasp? Too old to function? Yet still humming with intention. A scaffold around silence. A corridor through gravity. A question in ice. And perhaps, if we listen long enough, we'll hear more than static. We'll hear the movement of something that never stopped. Not since before we could see the stars. Not since before we had questions to ask. And in that movement, in the whisper of rings that do not fall, we may find our answer. Not in words, but in pattern. In a machine that speaks in orbit and waits patiently for us to remember how to read. They move, but we do not see it. The stars, silent in their brilliance, fixed, it seems, against the dome of night. Yet they are drifting. Every one. Each star in our sky is traveling its own path. A slow arc across a canvas too vast for eyes to measure. They weave the galaxy's story not in centuries, but in millions of years. This is proper motion. The subtle dance of stellar migration. Not spinning in place, but migrating, realigning, in grand celestial rivers that stretch across light years. And for a long time, we assumed this drift was random, the result of gravitational tides, stellar births, galactic turns. But recently, something has changed. We have measured the motion with precision. The Gaia mission, mapping over 1 billion stars, tracing their paths with exquisite clarity. And among the dance, among the drift, there are patterns, alignments, coherent flows that shouldn't exist. Stars, thousands of light years apart, moving as if responding to the same pull, as if following a design, not gravitational, but informational. What if the motion of stars is more than motion? What if it's a message? Imagine beings who do not speak in sound or light, who live on timescales we can barely conceive, beings for whom 1 million years is a moment, whose shape not planets, but stellar motion. Their language? Trajectory. A sentence written in the angle of stellar migration. A phrase carved into the sky by altering stellar velocity. A story told one star at a time. Each a word. Each a vector. Could we read it? Would we even recognize it? Perhaps not. Not yet. But we are beginning. Gaia's data has revealed stellar streams. Not just remnants of galaxies devoured by the Milky Way, but stars whose motions are too precise, too synchronized. Some suggest ancient megastructures, gravity engines that nudge stars. Others speak of long-forgotten intelligence, now reduced to the trails it left behind. But a few, a very few, suggest something stranger, that we are part of the message, that our sun, our system, was swept into this path on purpose, not to destroy, not to conquer, but to awaken, to see, to wonder, to decode the movement of our neighbors, and realize we are not alone in the sky's architecture, that we are walking along lines drawn before we had eyes. This theory sees the galaxy not as chaos, but as calligraphy, each star a stroke, each arc a syllable, and somewhere, in the pattern of drift, is the shape of meaning. Perhaps one day we'll map it fully, overlay time, space, and motion, render the flow of stars as we would a poem, and see, finally, what they have been trying to say. Or perhaps the message is not for us. Perhaps it is a reply, from one region of the galaxy to another, a slow ripple of communication, unfolding not in seconds, but in epochs. In this model, the stars themselves are couriers, their paths tuned to encode knowledge, not in content, but in motion. And when civilizations arise, they don't send signals, they adjust trajectories, a millimeter per year, a whisper in orbit, until, millions of years later, another civilization sees the pattern, feels the symmetry, and understands. No beacons, no artifacts, only movement. Because motion cannot be silenced. Because stars cannot be erased. And if the universe is indeed a conversation, then perhaps the proper motion of stars is its handwriting. We have only just begun to read, only just learned to hold the page steady. But already, we see the ink shimmering. Already, we sense the shape of something vast. A sentence begun before we were born, still being written, as we look up. And maybe, just maybe, we are part of the signature at the end. We breathe it without thinking. Oxygen. Every inhale, a quiet affirmation of life. But in the long history of Earth, oxygen was not always here. And when it arrived, it did so far too early. At least, according to biology, according to evolution. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old. But oxygen, as a dominant atmospheric gas, has only ruled for the last 2.4 billion. This change, known as the Great Oxidation Event, was radical, sudden, transformative. It altered the surface of the planet, killed countless anaerobic species, and made possible every form of complex life that followed. But here's the problem. It shouldn't have happened then. Our models suggest that photosynthetic life, cyanobacteria, the first organisms to produce oxygen, should have emerged much later. And even once they arrived, the oxygen they made should have been absorbed by the oceans, by minerals, by iron-rich rocks. The system should have stayed anaerobic for far longer. But it didn't. The oxygen levels surged, and the atmosphere changed. Too soon. Too fast. Why? Some geologists propose tectonic shifts, volcanism, the slowing of Earth's rotation. But each of these explains only a piece. The mystery remains. Who lit the match? This has led to stranger suggestions. What if the oxygen rise was not natural? What if it was initiated? Imagine a planet seeded not just with life, but with intention. Not panspermia in the traditional sense, but environmental engineering, terraforming. By who? Or what? We don't know. But the signature is there. A metabolic shift too early. Too sudden. Too perfect. It's not just the oxygen. It's the timing. Every major evolutionary leap. Photosynthesis, respiration, multicellularity. Emerges just as conditions become right. Not slightly before. Not long after. But almost precisely at the cusp. As if evolution is being nudged. Not controlled. But coaxed. Encouraged. Prepared. And the oxygen paradox is the loudest nudge. Because without it, there is no complex life. No animals. No cognition. No questions. Only slime. Some scientists now explore the possibility that Earth was influenced not by intelligence, but by precedent. That somewhere else in the galaxy, life evolved, learned, and then spread not organisms, but algorithms, programs, self-replicating instructions embedded in biology itself. What if cyanobacteria were not just life, but tools? What if their photosynthesis wasn't innovation, but activation? A planetary clock triggered when conditions align, to produce oxygen, to sterilize the past, and invite the future. This would mean that Earth is part of a wider system, a chain of experiments, each one passing along the spark. Or perhaps even stranger, the oxygen event was a message, not in words, but in process. A planetary beacon, visible to those who understand. Because an atmosphere rich in oxygen can be seen across light years. It is a signature, a flag, a whisper. Life has risen, and perhaps intelligence may follow. If so, Earth's breath is not just biological. It is cosmic. And we, born of this breath, are the continuation of that signal. We look for alien civilizations with telescopes. But perhaps they are looking back. Not at us, but at the oxygen. At the planet that spoke too soon. That changed before it was ready. That carried the memory of a breath that was not its own. And if we trace this breath back far enough, we may find its source, not in time, but in intention, not in fossils, but in the logic of atmospheres. And if we ever learn to engineer another world, to make it live, perhaps we, too, will trigger a paradox, and another species, billions of years from now, will breathe that mystery in, and ask, "Why did it happen so early?" And the answer will echo in their lungs, the way it echoes in ours now. Because someone lit the match. Because someone remembered how. We see stars. We see dust. We see light twisted by gravity, bent across eons. But underneath all of this, underneath the heat, the mass, the movement, there is something else. Structure. A hidden order, faint but persistent. As if the cosmos itself was drawn on invisible blueprints. We call it geometry. Not in the sense of shapes and triangles, but in the sacred arrangement of matter and space. In the lattice of galaxies. In the orbit of planets. In the spiral arms of stars and the angle at which light unfolds. There is pattern here. There is rhythm. There is resonance. The golden ratio appears in the swirl of hurricanes, the growth of plants, the curves of nautilus shells, and the distribution of spiral galaxies. Phi 1.618. A number woven into the quiet architecture of matter. Coincidence? Perhaps. But the coincidence is compound. The hydrogen line, used to seek out alien communication, sits at 1420 MHz. A frequency not just common to space, but mathematically elegant. The distances between planetary orbits are not random, but follow repeating intervals, as if placed with deliberate cadence. Even the cosmic microwave background, that oldest of lights, left over from the birth of the universe, isn't entirely chaotic. It has cold spots, voids, symmetries, traces of geometry in the most ancient canvas of all. And what does this suggest? That the universe does not just happen. It composes, like a symphony, like an equation, like thought. Some physicists now speak of the universe not as a machine, but as information, a quantum code, a simulation, a pattern so dense it births meaning. What if everything we experience, time, heat, causality, are emergent properties of a more fundamental structure? Not matter, not energy, but geometry. Think of the Platonic solids. 5 shapes of perfect symmetry: tetrahedron, cube, octahedron, dodecahedron, icosahedron. Once dismissed as philosophy, now echoed in the shapes of carbon molecules, in viral shells, in planetary arrangements, even in the shape of the universe itself. The dodecahedral model of the cosmos, a proposal that the universe loops through 12 pentagonal facets, gained brief traction when patterns in the cosmic background seemed to match, and sacred geometry, long treated as mysticism, now resurfaces in the mathematics of crystals, of fields, of quantum systems. It seems there is something beneath reality, whispering with angles and ratios. What if this resonance is not just natural, but intentional? Not designed like a blueprint, but grown like a song? What if civilizations do not send signals, but build with resonance? What if deep geometry is the language of advanced minds? Not because it is pretty, but because it is universal. A circle in Euclidean space is a circle anywhere. A Fibonacci spiral grows the same way in any galaxy. And perhaps, somewhere far beyond us, they built with this knowledge structures tuned not for function, but for meaning. We might one day find artifacts, not metal, not wires, but patterns, ratios, mathematical constants carved into the stars. And we will know them not by sight, but by harmony, because truth resonates, and geometry sings. The early universe may have known this. It may have emerged not from chaos, but from symmetry breaking, a perfect form fracturing, to create the imperfect beauty of life. And we, creatures of breath and time, feel this resonance in music, in art, in architecture, in the shape of the bones inside our hands. We do not understand it, but we are shaped by it, built upon it, and maybe, in the quiet corridors of thought, we carry its memory, the memory of a structure that does not change, that cannot break, that holds us, even when stars fall, and time forgets our names. A structure that whispers, "You are part of the pattern," not separate, not accidental, but necessary. And when the last star dies, when entropy dims the sky, the geometry will remain, silent, resonant, waiting for the next beginning. All 10 additional segments are now complete. Let me know if you'd like the entire set compiled, cleaned, or adapted into other formats or languages. One day, this sky we know will vanish, not in fire, not in war, but in quiet. The stars will dim, the galaxies will stretch, the last warmth of the cosmos will bleed into cold. And yet, This is not the end. Not truly. Because long after the hydrogen is spent, long after black holes evaporate into silence, something will remain. Memory. Not just ours, but the memory of structure, of motion, of intention. The patterns we traced in the sky, the signals we sent, the questions we asked with such urgency. Knowing the silence might be the only reply. We were small, but we were listening, and that matters. Because even now, in this moment, you are part of the long story. You, reading this, breathing in time with the stars, carrying in your atoms the ashes of suns, and in your thoughts, the reach of light, the great mysteries, the meteors, the moons, the machines in orbit, the lost civilizations, the missing signals. They may never yield their final answers, but they were always more than answers. They were mirrors. Each anomaly, each unexplained shadow, asked us to look inward, as much as outward, to see not just the cosmos, but our place within it, to ask not only, what is out there, but what kind of being chooses to wonder? And the wondering, that is the legacy. Even if our signals fade, even if no one hears us, even if there was never anyone listening at all, the act of curiosity is itself a kind of light, a candle against the abyss. And in that flickering glow, we shape stories. We imagine machines beneath the moon. We traced maps in stellar drift. We whispered to rings and fossils and forgotten iron. We asked if the silence was empty, or simply waiting. And maybe that is enough, because in the end, we are stardust that remembers. We are matter that listens. We are gravity's brief poem, speaking back to the dark. So sleep now, cradled in orbit, tethered to mystery. The sky is still turning, the stars still drift, and somewhere, deep beneath the silence, the universe remembers that you were here, and that you asked?